What's going on, Exile? Welcome to my Vaal Burning Arrow Champion that uses two different burning arrow setups, one for clearing and then one for bosses. Against bosses I use a chainsaw bow and starts by firing my Vaal skill because it cannot be evaded, and then since I'm a champion the rest of my hits can't be evaded either. The Vaal skill also works as ignited for extra damage, plus it does quite a lot of damage on its own. As you can see in the video, the boss damage is pretty good, and I also really enjoyed it for mapping once I stopped trying to make it work without peers. So let's have a look at all the items that I use for this character. The unique items that I use for this build is firstly the Lionel's Glare Bow for clearing, and then the Chainsaw Bow for bosses. I use the Chainsaw Bow for bosses because of the 100% extra damage it gives at close range. Then I use two signal fire quivers, one for each bow, and I use these quivers for the extra fire damage and fire conversion. Then I use a Starconia's head for the life, attack speed and evasion, as well as a Lorweave body armor for the extra damage. Alternatively, you could 6-link your chainsaw and keep the single target setup there, and use a Comb's heart for the extra life instead. Then I used a pair of Tome Fists for the abyssal sockets, and since I'm a champion and already intimidated enemies on full life, I went for searching jewels for the free Maimon hit. The only time you need a murderous eye jewel is when boss encounters start with them not being on full life. Lastly, I use a Lionel's Fall jewel to turn melee modifiers into bow ones, and apply this jewel where you can see on the screen right now. For rares, these are the stats that you're looking for. Basically you want life and resist on all of your items, but just make sure that fire is equal or higher than the other resistances because of the Wise Oak Flask. Other than that, I try to get some extra physical, fire and elemental damage to all of my attacks. On the amulet, and possibly on some of the jewels as well, you could also get some more crit multipliers as well. For Flasks, I went for a Divine Life Flask with instant recovery on low life and immune to bleeding, and at Serious Promise, a Diamond Flask with immune to freeze, a Silver Flask with immune to curses, and lastly I switched between a Quicksilver Flask and a Wise Oak. My main gem setup, which I used in my body armor, is the Vaal Burning Arrow setup for single targets, and with that I combine elemental damage with attacks, lower projectiles, combustion, immolate and fire penetration. Then for my second burning arrow setup, which I kept in my Lionel's Glare Bow, I used regular burning arrow, elemental damage with attacks, increased critical strikes, greater multiple projectiles, mirage archer and combustion. In my helm I use my auras and movement skills, and they are Herald of Ash, Anger, Blink Arrow and faster attacks. And then in my boots I used my defensive setup, which was Immortal Call level 12, cast from damage taken level 10, Blood Rage and increased duration. Then in my chainsaw bow, which I kept in my secondary weapon slot and you can press X to switch to, I used my Blasphemy setup to trigger Adrenaline. So in that I had Poacher's Mark, Blood Magic and Blasphemy. Lastly I had Decoy Totem and Summon Ice Golem as well in my gloves. For skills, these are the progressions that I went with. I picked up plenty of life, elemental damage and bow nodes. Then I got the claw nodes on the right side and turned them into bow nodes as well with the Lionel's Fall jewel. I also picked up the extra pierce nodes for clearing speed, but if you'd rather use these points elsewhere, then I recommend replacing the Mirage Archer skill gem for a pierce one instead. I also got plenty of extra evasion, including acrobatics, which does a good job of keeping me alive. Then lastly I got some extra crit modifiers and jewel sockets to put my damage over the top. For Ascendancy I first went for Conqueror and then Worthy Foe for the chance to taunt and the 100% hit against taunted enemies. And thirdly I got First to Strike, Last to Fall for the free intimidation, as well as gaining the adrenaline buff whenever I hit low life. Adrenaline grants 100% increased damage, 25% increased attack and movement speed, as well as 10% increased physical damage reduction, and lasts for 20 seconds, so it's a pretty powerful buff. Lastly I picked up Inspirational for more damage and movement speed. For Pantheon I went for Soul of Lunaris as Major Guard for physical damage reduction, as well as some increased movement speed. You also get a chance to avoid projectiles and to dodge attacks and spells. For minor guard I went for solo growth cult for even more physical damage reduction, as well as whenever an enemy hit me they get reduced attack speed. For bandits either help Alira or kill them all. For leveling, I pretty much always recommend using a tabula rasa body armor, and this build is no different. I started using Vaal Burning Arrow already from level 1 and combined that with Mirage Archer and Pierce. Then at level 8 I combined it with lesser multiple projectiles and added fire damage as well. I leveled with a Quill Rainbow from level 5 and used that until level 32 when I switched over to a Death's Harp, and I used that until I switched over to my real bows. I used my Vaal Burning Arrow setup for single targets in my bows, which were either 4 or 5 links while leveling. Other uniques I used while leveling include the Nocturnal Caress gloves, Astronaut's Mark circlet, Wanderlust boots and Black Card rings. The main pros, or positives if you will, of this build is a good all-round capability of both killing bosses and clearing maps. It can run most map mods and it was very fun to play. The main cons of this build include not being able to run elemental effect mods since we are 100% converted to fire. It was also not that great of a chart for going down below 300 or so in the delve. Overall though, it was a very pleasing character to play and it was a fun way to turn a champion into an archer. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe you want to try the build out, maybe not, but either way I hope I see you in that next video. Goodbye Exile.